汇集天下大事，聚焦华人热点。西雅图中文电台网络电视。
There's very few places in the city of Seattle that reflect what happens when community stands for itself, comes together, and demands its voice be heard than here at El Centro de la Raza. I mean, from the group of activists, Estela and Roberto and others, who took a school thinking they could do better, now we have a plaza and housing and a center for community throughout Seattle. So thank you, Estela. I also want to call out council members Teresa Mosqueda and Lorena Gonzalez, who are here. They have their leadership on this and other issues of equity have been outstanding, and we literally would not be where we were if they did not help us organize with community and community voices. Our country is still grappling with the history of exclusion and systemic racism. We know it's true. We know that people deliberately have not been counted, have been undercounted, and even have not been counted as a whole person in the history of our country. That base instinct is exactly what has driven our president to take the stance he has for this census, to purposely exclude and undercount people. Let us be clear. We know who he wants to undercount. People of color, the LGBT community, immigrants, and refugees. We have to make sure that doesn't happen. As has already been noted, the census count requires that everybody be counted, because everybody counts. And that count has some fundamentally important things to it. Number one, it's a recognition that people actually do count. Second, the federal government uses those counts to determine what part of our tax dollars come back to us so that we can support programs like SNAP, rapid rehousing, Medicaid, and the like. It's also used to determine what voice we have in Washington, D.C. We know that we are one of the fastest growing cities and regions in America right now. It is likely that we're entitled to another congressional seat, another voice in Washington to make sure the values of this Washington can become dominant in that Washington. But if people are not counted, that can all be jeopardized. We know that communities of color and those who have been purposely excluded distrust government, and for good reason. That's why this fund is so important, because we know in the city of Seattle that to get this right, we have to empower our community partners. This has to be community-based and community-led. There has to be trust for people to come forward and agree to be counted.
Census Fund and partner with the county and the city. Seattle Foundation's commitment to full and fair census is based upon one fundamental principle: the importance of ensuring that everyone is counted and heard, especially those often excluded. An incomplete census jeopardizes critical work and decisions across every aspect of community life. Washington State has more than 1.6 million residents from historically hard-to-count communities and population groups, nearly half of King County's growth.
To community-based organizations to help them reach people who have historically been undercounted. With a $500,000 investment from the Seattle Foundation, with $250,000 each from the City of Seattle and from King County, we will help empower trusted messengers and organizations to ensure a complete, accurate count in communities throughout the nation's 13th largest county. We're applying the same approach that made King County one of the best affordable care success stories in America, cutting the uninsured rate by more than half. It's the same approach that we used in signing up people for low-income bus fare, and in preventing families and children by the thousands from falling into homelessness. By partnering with organizations that have earned the trust of communities that are hardest to reach, including immigrants and refugees, people of color, people who identify as LGBTQ, people who are experiencing homelessness, and others. We will reach people who have been historically underserved and undercounted. This is the type of combined effort that demonstrates our strong commitment as a welcoming, inclusive community where all people have the opportunity to thrive. I'm honored to be joined by Mayor Durkin and by Tony Mestras, President and CEO of the Seattle Foundation, who've demonstrated outstanding leadership in this community-wide effort. Today, as part of an act of community building and an act, in many ways, of defiance by our region against what's going on in Washington, D.C. I am so grateful to see so many here today who are going to support our effort to make sure every person is counted. The guiding principle, the entire premise of democracy is that all people have a voice. Well, even though that principle, like so many others in America today, is at risk or plainly under direct attack by the White House, we stand by that principle. We are here today as a result of our partnership with you, with those in the communities we serve. We are exactly 1 year from Census Day 2020. And I have to say the power of partnerships in getting us to that day cannot be underestimated. We're filling out a coordinated regional framework to align census efforts, from our regional Complete Count Committee to Seattle's Census Task Force, from Washington State's Complete Count Committee to a table now forming in East King County, to tables in Snohomish and Pierce and other counties, and a table forming now in South King County. In preparing for the 2020 census, we have taken the notion of partnership, of collective impact, to an entirely new level. The stakes are high. This administration, its actions to set the 2020 census up for failure are abhorrent. Be it the proposed addition of a citizenship question abandoned some 70 years ago, or the deliberate attempts to underfund and thus undermine the Bureau. In 2016, in fact, some of you will recall, we stood here at El Centro in the old
Plaza. I'm very disappointed that my successor at the Department of Commerce has proposed that we include this citizenship question. As we've heard from many other speakers, this really is an initiative of the White House, and it is designed simply to discourage people of color, immigrants, and people from the urban areas from being counted. This is a constitutional requirement that we have a count of all the people living in America every 10 years, and it started in 1790 under President George Washington. And for the last 70 years, we've not asked a citizenship question. It is not necessary to have a citizenship question on the census every 10 years because the Commerce Department is able to collect that information from other surveys that it conducts every single year. So why have this citizenship question now? It's blatantly clear that this administration, as was brought out in the lawsuit, wishes to suppress the number of people participating in the census. And why does it matter? Why does it matter? Because people who are hard to serve are the actual beneficiaries and the primary beneficiaries of the funds that would flow from an accurate census. As we've heard, almost $17 billion in the last several years has been coming to the state of Washington based on the 2010 census. That's over $2,300 per person. And it goes into programs that in fact would directly benefit those people who are hard to count. The homeless, low income, immigrants, LGBT communities, and the list goes on, and people in the urban areas. Programs like food stamps, low-income housing, Medicaid, child nutrition programs, and the list goes on. The very communities that are traditionally harder to count are the main beneficiaries of the money that would come from an accurate 2020 census. In 2010, we were faced in the United States government with a troubled 2010 census. It was projected to be very difficult. President Obama inherited a mess, and we at the Commerce Department that I led was responsible for the conduct and the implementation of the census. I have to tell you that we were able to reverse a several decade-long trend of people not responding to the census, not mailing back the census form. And in 2010, not only did we reverse that and have one of the highest participation rates in recent decades, but we also had one of the most accurate censuses ever conducted. The key to that is using trusted partners, people in the community, faith-based leaders, leaders of social and civic organizations that the people, the communities respected. There's always suspicion toward the government, whether it's the city, the county, the state, the federal government. The key to our success in 2010 was reaching out to community groups, leaders of people's communities. And that's why this regional census fund is so important, and that's why I have to simply laud and commend the Seattle Foundation, the City of Seattle, and King County for stepping up and creating this $1 million fund that will be eligible for community-based groups to get the word out to the members of their community, the people they serve, on the importance of this census. Trying to count the homeless, trying to count immigrants in this time of fear, trying to count people of color in this time of fear is going to be even more difficult, because this year people will have the opportunity to respond to the census using the internet. Now, a lot of these hard to count communities don't have access to the internet. And so trying to get the word out, creating new systems by which organizations can help these individuals submit their responses,